we all know how short life is. I mean, the mortality rate is still tracking at 100% the last time I checked. And even though this life is short, we still don't want it to suck. This podcast is all about tools and insights from psychology, philosophy, and spirituality to help this journey suck less. In fact, we may even learn how to embrace the life we have while creating the life that we want. My name is Morgan, and this is the PS We Expire podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the PS We Expire podcast. I am Morgan. If you have not ever been on this show before, I just want to tell you thank you so much for being here. This podcast has just been so fun. I've done it for just over a year now, and I've talked about a wide range of things. And what I'm going to talk about today, this idea of a script, I'm so excited to share with you because this idea, I think, will create a really positive change in your life. Now, I titled it very simply The Script because of this idea that kind of floats around in like this self-help, self-improvement sphere of like that you are the author of your own story. You are the leading character in the play, in the movie of your life. You need to act like the main character. You're the star of the show. And I love that idea. And many of us try to latch onto that idea of this empowerment and intentionality, but we don't ever address the script that we are reading from. So if we're envisioning our lives as a play, let's say, and we don't really like how the story is going, we don't really stop to analyze how we got this story in the first place. And so the idea of the script is that we start to look at the way things are playing out, the things that we say, the behavioral patterns that we perpetuate, that we kind of just are in, these ruts of choices, and we aren't really making the changes that we want to in our lives. We don't seem to be able to break out of these funks that we're in, or we somehow feel trapped by our circumstances. And I want to talk about how insidious this idea is that we don't have any ability to write our own script. We don't have any ability to change the script or change the story. As I was thinking about this concept of the script, think about your life like a play. And you've got all of these other characters in there, and these costume changes and set changes. And then at some, you have the end of the play at some point. And many of us don't think about the second act. We don't think about how we want the play to end. And many, many times we don't even think about the lines that we are saying. We don't think about all of these behaviors that we continue to perpetuate all the time. Part of the reason why that is because we were given a script in childhood. We were given the script that says, this is how people in relationships behave. This is how you are to live your life as a man or a woman. This is what is expected of you in society. This is what you should be in regards to your religion or your career or parenting. You should be a parent. You shouldn't be a parent. You should be a stay-at-home mom. You should be a career mom. All of these things, we have these scripts that are written for us and handed to us in childhood, and we don't even recognize that those scripts are handed to us. And many people get to a point in their life where they recognize that something is off and they're not totally sure what it is. And in this metaphor of your life being a play and the things that you're doing being the script, I think what happens is we get to the point where we realize that the script doesn't actually fit us. The character that the script, the person that script was written for isn't me. And then we start to have some real like cognitive dissonance. We start to have some real underlying frustrations or a sense of disempowerment in our lives because we recognize that script doesn't fit us, but we don't recognize yet that we have the ability to change what's happening. I I think a lot of times this happens when we have circumstances come into our lives that are really, really difficult. And we're forced to look at our own mortality, and we're forced to look at our identity in new ways. So many times people will have major identity shifts when they become a parent. They may have a major identity shift when they lose a job, or if they decide that they don't want to have a particular career anymore. They lose their a part of their identity, or their part of their identity shifts when a parent dies, or when a close friend, you know, ends up not being in your life anymore. We have all of these people that tell us who we are. That's part of this script that has been handed to us, is we believe that all these people get to tell us who we are, and we don't really ask the questions of like, who do I say that I am? And so some of this is like understanding that I can actually decide how I want this to go for me. What kind of character do I actually want to be? And the more that your character, AKA the person that you present to the world, aligns with who you really are, the less internal friction there is, because there's not any part of you that's hiding, or there's not any part of you that's performing. You just are yourself. And I think I like this metaphor a lot of, like what's the part that you're playing that doesn't actually fit you? What is that part that you're playing? What's that part that you've been asked to play? What's that part that you were just expected to play? What's that part that you thought that you would like playing, and it turns out that you don't? Turns out that everything that you kind of thought that you would enjoy as an adult, or maybe that you have enjoyed in the past as an adult and you don't anymore, it's okay to rewrite the script. It's okay to change a scene. It's okay to put a costume change in here when it wasn't supposed to happen until act 2, scene 7. Scene 7. That would be a lot of scenes in a play. Anyway, so the script that we have for ourselves is usually written unconsciously. It's usually given to us in childhood, and it's not until we become adults that we start to ask the question about like, who wrote this script anyway? Who was the playwright on this? Who was the playwright? And usually it's our caretakers, our caregivers, our parents, and other people who were a big influence on our lives when we were children. We learned from them like, oh, I see now. That's how relationships are played out. I see this is how a woman behaves. Okay, yeah, you're taking notes and you're writing your own play. And then when you become an adult and you decide, oh, I see, everybody else was still writing, either consciously writing their scripts for themselves, or they believe that there's like this bigger playbook that says who needs to be where, who needs to hit what mark, who needs to behave in a certain way. So we move through life holding ourselves to these particular scripts, not understanding that we get to change them at any point. At any point along the way, we can choose to change a script. And that is an incredibly freeing and maybe a little bit terrifying truth, that there are so many things that we can make, that we can do to change our lives. And oftentimes it's fear that keeps us from doing that. But that we have the ability to do so many things, make so many different choices than we've made up to this point. And just because you used to like something doesn't mean that you have to like it forever. Just because you thought that you would enjoy something and you don't, doesn't mean that you have to keep doing it. You can change the script. Okay. Now here's where we get into something that I think is even more helpful than this. Yes, this idea of like write your own script for your own life is really important. Very, very important. And this next part may be more important. And it's that often we have scripts for other people and we don't even tell them what is written on that script. We have ways that we expect people to behave in our lives according to our own script. And when they don't, we get mad. or we get sad, or we get, upset that they're not doing the thing that we want them to be doing, that they're missing their marks, they're not saying their lines right. We have expectations of how it's going to go, and we don't like it when people deviate from our script. But we really got to get ourselves into hot water when we have scripts for other people that not only are we completely unaware of, but that they also are unaware of. One of the prime examples of this is when you get into a relationship and you are operating on the script that you have written about how people behave in relationships, whether that is, gender stereotypes, like who takes care of what in the household, or and you realize that the other person also has their own script that they're running. So you're coming into this relationship with two different ideas about how the other person should be, the lines that they should be saying in your play, and they're not. And so that creates so much relational strife when we don't recognize that that's what we're doing. For example, if you have something that is really bothering you, or maybe you're feeling very vulnerable or upset about something, and you go to your partner and you tell them about it, and they respond in a way that is surprising or hurtful or confusing to you, that you can recognize in that moment, like, oh, this is not going the way that I thought it was going to go. And a lot of times we will then attribute like negative characteristics to that other person. Will say like, oh, they're super selfish, or they can't ever listen to me, or they don't ever empathize, or they don't validate my feelings, or whatever. Which, some of those things may be true, but if we're not having conversations with that person and telling them like, oh, I have this script for you, and this is how I want you to respond in those situations, or and we're not even saying like that they have to respond that way, but just to recognize in yourself like, oh, I actually had a way that I was expecting this other person to behave, and when they didn't, that's what kind of rankled me. That's what got my hackles up. That's what made me feel alone or disconnected. And so many of our relational struggles can be fixed by, number one, recognizing the script that you have written for other people, whether that's a partner or a parent or a friend or whatever, that recognizing that you do have a script written for that person. And the second thing is to inform the other person of the script that you have running. And this isn't a license to then insist that other people perform according to your script, because in the first part of this, when I was talking about that people have written scripts for us in childhood, it doesn't feel good when someone else is holding you to a script that you haven't bought into, that you haven't agreed to. And yet we do that to people in our relationships all the time. We hold them to these scripts that they didn't agree to, that doesn't feel natural to them, that they haven't decided, yeah, like let's collaborate on this script together and decide what lines we want to say and how we want these situations to go. How do I want this scene to go? When this thing comes up in our life, the circumstance comes up, how do each of us want to respond to that? How do we want to look at this as a team? How do we want to look at this in how it's going to benefit our relationship? If we're not having those conversations, why are we just expecting the other person to know what we're thinking? That's not only is that not fair, but you know what that feels like to be on the receiving end of that, and it sucks. What I want to suggest is that we allow people to ad lib in our scripts, that we allow people to, like, that we treat it instead of treating it like a play where everybody has to say their lines just right, that we allow our lives to be more like improv, and that we lean into the surprise and the delight of letting people be exactly who they are and deciding how we're going to respond to that. Many people who are afraid of, they're afraid that they don't know how they're going to be when difficult circumstances arise tend to be people who are more perfectionists in not only in their relationships. I mean, that's probably one of the more obvious places that you see it, but become perfectionists in their work life, become perfectionists in all sorts of things, because if there's a deep unrest about how you're going to be okay or how you're going to handle things happening that you're not expecting, the more we are going to insist that everybody operates according to our script. And that is just not realistic. And it is also really damaging in our relationships. So if we can allow people to ad lib in our story, if we can allow people to improvise with us, and if we can recognize the times when we're operating from a script that we're either just kind of saying the lines unconsciously, we haven't really thought about it. We haven't really thought about whether or not this is how I want things to go. Then we can start to unravel and change the way that we're operating in our lives according to our own script. But then we can communicate those needs to other people in a much more compassionate, empathetic way, in a way that doesn't demonize the other person, but just like that, we just have this realization that all of us really are operating on systems that are different. And that can be a really good thing, because when you improvise, not only does that leave room for creativity and curiosity, which are one of the best parts about being a human, but that you start to look at things in a new way. You start to see people's perspectives that are different than yours, and you stop saying that they're wrong and you start saying they're just different. And that is the best way to grow yourself. That's the best way to have a more expanded and compassionate and empathetic perspective for humanity and in the world in general, is if you allow yourself to be surprised and delighted by the way that other people view things. And this is not easy if this is really not easy if the script that someone else is running on is very, very different than yours. If it is like a complete opposite in some of the areas that are most important to you, this can be really, really challenging. But I think even just recognizing not what's written in the script, but that you have a script and that everybody has a script is one of the ways that we just then get to connect with other people, because we recognize like, oh, I see, like you're coming to this world and you've come to this view or this conviction or this mindset because of the way that you were raised and the things that have happened to you. And I've come to the way that I believe, for different reasons, but we're both in this place together where we want to know that we're loved and that we want to be safe in the world and we want to be connected. So the more that we can look past the lines and we can just see that we're both holding scripts and we're both like little kids kind of, trying to just figure out ways to move through life without getting hurt, the easier it is to connect with other people. A good question to ask, and if you're going to explain this concept to somebody else who, you want to have a better relationship with it in your life, you can ask people, is this the part that you want to play in my play? Do you want to be this character? Do you want to be this person in my play, or should we write your character different? Can you tell me in which ways I fell short in this character development within my own mind? Because this is a really interesting concept, is that in the world there isn't just one Morgan. That's me. I'm Morgan. There isn't just one of me. Like, yeah, I exist in my physical form in my person, but there also is a version of me that exists in the mind of everybody who's ever known me. And none of the versions that anybody has in their mind is a full picture of who I am, because number one, nobody is around me all the time. And number two, even if they were around me all the time, no one else is privy to my private thoughts. No one else understands why I think the way that I do and how I think. Nobody else is privy to that besides me. So the version of me that exists in everybody else's mind is not really me. And so when we adopt this analogy of the script or the play, we can ask the people in our lives, how have you written me? What does this character look like that you have in your play that's me? And then hopefully I can maybe correct some of the ways that you got it wrong, or I can be excited about the ways that they got it right. And it may take work to help them adjust their own narrative about you. And that's fine. And if you want that person in your life, if you want that relationship to continue to strengthen and deepen, these are really important conversations to have. Like, I wouldn't just have this with the random person that knew me in high school, because I don't really care that much about what they think of me. That's fine. But it is important to have these kinds of conversations with people that you really care about and that you want to have around. The other good question that you can ask people is, can we write this script together? In your deeper relationships, whether it's, with your BFF or your partner or your parent or your child even, you can start to ask questions that are directed more towards this idea of collaboration. Like if I want to, and I do, intentionally write the story of my life, not just what is past. Ooh, this will be a fun topic for a different podcast episode, but I'll tell you really quick, this understanding of the past is that the way that we remember the past isn't just the event, but it's every time that we have remembered that event from the time it happened until now. And so that event doesn't exist objectively. It really only exists in who we are in the moments that we remember that, and who we are now that interprets what happened according to where we are now. So the past is really like a kind of a muddy thing. So when I'm talking about intentionally writing your future script, we also do have the ability to rewrite the script from the past. That's exciting. Anyway, but if we're going to write the script going forward, what we want the rest of this play to look like, what we want the final scene to look like, what do we want the last word to be before curtains? What do we want this play to look like? And for the people that are closest to you in your life, you can ask them, can we write this together? What do I want my life to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? What do I want? Who do I want to be at that time? And the more clear that I can get about that, while also keeping the flexibility there for the improvisation and for things to change. If I ask the question more about who I want to be, instead of being really dogmatic and perfectionistic about the physical goals that I want to achieve, like, who do I want to become? Then I can be much more intentional about writing the script in order for me to become that person. Who do I want to be? What kinds of things do I want to try on in the next handful of years, in the next couple of decades? What things do I want to attempt? Which ways do I want to push myself and make myself grow? These are all really important questions to ask. If we don't ask ourselves these questions, we will continue to play out whatever script has been handed to us. And we will continue to feel disconnected from the life that is most fulfilling, because we're not asking those questions about, how did I get the script that I currently have in my hand? Who told me that I was supposed to be this way? Who told me that these are the things I'm supposed to do and not supposed to do? How did I get this? How did I get this script? Who's the playwright? You get to start to ask yourself questions about, like, what do I want my next line to be? What do I want my next costume change to be? What do I want this scene to be? What do I want this scenery to look like? How do I want this lighting to be? Okay, my analogy is breaking down a little bit, but you get it. You get it. This is about intentionally choosing the life that we want, instead of just, oh, well, this is the life I have. And if you really love the life that you have, I mean, that might be a stroke of luck that you just happen to fall into things that really suited you very well. But I would also challenge you that even if you're, really content and happy with the life that you have, you can still ask yourself these questions about, how did you get here and where do you want to go from here? It's all very exciting. And I want you to take heart with this idea of the script that we are forcing other people to read from, even if they don't know it. Your relationships are going to improve dramatically when you just let people be exactly who they are. Now, I'll tell you the important kind of caveat with this freedom and letting people be who they are. That doesn't mean that you have to continue to be with that person in the same way if you don't like parts of who they are. You can ask them to change. And if they don't, because they don't want to, then you get to decide how you get to be in that person's life. I think this is like one of the most amazing gifts to any relationship, is that it really takes it out of the realm of shoulds, like you should be this way or you shouldn't be this way. And you just let people be exactly who they are. And then the power comes for you to decide if you want that or not. And if you don't, then you can change things. You can either change things in the relationship or you can change the relationship. And again, this isn't just with like a romantic partner, but this is like in any of your relationships. What a great thing. What a great thing and a great gift to encourage people to be more of exactly who they are. Now, many people bristle at this and fight against this because in the realm of self-improvement, it's almost like a bad word to love people like exactly who they are. But my question is like, how many times have you changed because you felt like you were forced to change? How many times have you changed for a little while and then gone back to a different way because it just wasn't you? It didn't fit you. And I'm not talking about like some of the maybe unhealthy habits that we adopt that we know aren't good for us. But I'm talking about like real lasting change that comes on like a level of your deepest needs and your deepest dreams and your deepest goals and values. If you try and change those because, of fear, then you're just going to continue to perpetuate that internal chaos and resistance because you're not living in alignment. So this isn't like a blanket statement when you say like love people for exactly who love them exactly as they are. What's the downside of doing that exactly? The only downside to that is if we believe that loving someone exactly as they are means that you have to be in their life in exactly the same way that you always have, and you don't. So that's it for today. Become intentional about writing your own script. Start to ask questions about where are you holding other people to saying the right lines according to your script when you haven't even told them. How can you bring this habit of improvisation into your relationships so that you let people riff off of you and that you become more flexible in the way that you think about your life, and that you start to unpack how you got the script that you have and deciding whether or not you want to keep reading out of that one or if you want to write a different one. It's really exciting. It's really exciting to think about that you get to be the playwright. It's very fun. And I also know that is really terrifying because if you knew the depth of freedom that you have in your life, sometimes it can feel a little bit paralyzing. But just start to get curious, ask yourself questions, and do more of what makes you happy. Do more of what lights you up at a soul level. And those are the best scenes that you can write into your script, right? All right. So that's it for today. Write your script intentionally. And before we go,